Hello, hello, hello.
You will notice
everybody.
your name is in the credits, Vlad.
Yay! Upgrade.
That's right.
15 episodes.
It's been demoted to a regular.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you, Matt. That makes me
Sure.
feel good.
I even spelled it right.
Yes.
It's
we
the
have
IY on the end that throws
Yeah,
hard
it's a
one.
mess. It's the
Special
beauty
guest.
of translating something from Cyrillic to the Latin. You don't worry about it. There's no good explanation for it.
Everybody see this guy right here? Our
Yeah, special guest.
Rob Stanley. It's like Hollywood Squares, you know.
Yeah, that one.
Diagonal, yeah.
Right.
That works
Rob-
out really well. Welcome, Rob.
Stanley, welcome.
Hey guys, glad to be joining you today.
This is number 15, Mr. Summers.
Number 15. That's a lot.
We've been doing this since when was the first one? It was
2020 at some point.
shortly after the pandemic started. And welcome back, everybody. We know we have a faithful following for these, and we do repeat ourselves a little bit sometimes.
First mailbag episode, though. Never done that.
This is a new one. Yes.
Yeah. The whole mailbag idea was, we have these chats and we have questions and we award prizes to the best questions. And, there's so many questions that either we try to answer as many as we can, or we've moved on to the next one and all that. So we're going to open up the mailbag today from a lot of different sources.
Yeah.
Some stuff's coming in via the internet. Some stuff's coming in from previous listening lounges. There's multiple different ways we're getting these questions. And then your questions today, if you're watching, post some questions in the comments and we will try to get to those as well. But you guys are controlling the dialogue here because this is the kinds of questions that you want to know. And we've got, the official people online here to answer these questions. We've got the experts and I'm going to feed them to you guys because clearly not an expert on this side, but I'm going to ask you guys some interesting questions.
So, Natalie, yes, happy Friday Eve. I concur.
Hey, Nat.
That's why we do this on Thursdays.
Yes.
It is a little jump on the weekend, and Fridays are hopefully fun for everybody. But we want to kick off the weekend for people that might be traveling on Fridays. Sometimes they miss this. Friday evenings are not always convenient.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's family time or going out, enjoying this nice fall weather. The fall weather kicked in. Is today the 22nd? Today's the first day of fall, right?
Yep.
It's like somebody hit the switch up here in Indy.
20-degree drop.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, and
Just like
my
to
wife
point out,
just put pumpkins out everywhere.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out it's Thursday night and the Steelers are actually playing tonight, so that's a little bit of a holiday right there.
That hat though, that's like a real stealth hat, which I understand why you wear the stealth version of that in Colts country, Mr. Rob. I get it. You got to look closely at that hat.
The Colts have a tie. They're doing okay.
Who's quarterbacking the Steelers tonight?
Trubisky.
Okay. Best of luck with that.
Hey, he's better than we are.
That's true. Everyone is better than I am.
Okay, on that note, let's have a little toast. It is a little bit of a tradition. We have a little happy hour here, everybody. And whatever your favorite refreshment is, we don't judge. We just welcome all. But we do typically introduce, like maybe say, what is your beverage if you want to share. Matt, I'm going to guess.
Yes.
I bet you have a metal Klipsch cup.
Yes.
And it's a very nicely insulated cup. I'm going to guess a red wine in there.
That's exactly right, Mark. I never deviate.
Wow.
But I thought you did last week with the
We had some bourbon last week. I actually did.
Hotel
That
Tango.
was fantastic. That was so good.
Yeah.
I'm back to the wine though. That Schmallow is gone.
That's cool. And Vlad, what do you have there?
Ooh.
Called M43 from Old Nation Brewing Company, and if you know, you know. It's a very, very good beer. And however, if you ever order it and you're in the Midwest and you're in Michigan area where you can get M43, this beer distinctly, you can pour 20 beers. You know which one is the M43 because it looks like egg yolks. It is so thick. It is so thick you cannot see through it. Absolutely not.
Okay, that's a new one.
Wow.
Wow.
So you have to go off camera and pour it into a glass.
So you feel like Rocky drinking it?
Yes.
So right out of the
Rocky
blender.
Balboa.
Nice. Anyone else?
Sure. I'm actually drinking a non-alcoholic drink. It's called Monday, and it's a gin replacement. They make a whiskey and a gin. I prefer the gin to the whiskey, although
Very
with
cool.
alcohol, I prefer the whiskey. But that's on account of needing to be productive a couple hours from now in other time zones on a conference call.
Maybe some overseas calls. I get it, Rob. I get it. Well, if it's Monday, see, in my opinion, that should be like a double, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Amen.
Double non-alcoholic beverage. I love it.
I am supporting a local. This is Three Floyds. Some people may know them from Zombie Dust or Gumball Head, but this is a relative. I think this year I discovered this. It's called Barbarian Haze Ipa. So it's a very flavorful hazy IPA, and I'm going to pour that in my bourbon glass. I like to see the color of these. When they drink them out of the can, I'll see what the color is. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah, Three Floyds has recently become distributed in Michigan and the broader Midwest area. So that is awesome.
It's a nice color. Yeah. Cheers, everybody. Here's to your health and happiness.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah, this beer even has instructions about the amount of sediment and the fact that you need to roll it if you're going to drink it from the can.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got your B vitamins in there waiting for it. That's good for you.
Sediment never was a very appealing word to me when you're talking about anything, really.
Well, it's in your red wine, too,
Yes, I'm sure it is. They just don't put it on the side of the bottle. Now with more sediment.
It's more of a meal that way.
I would like to taste that sometimes. Sometime, Vlad, I'll have to check it out.
It's very good. It's very good. It does not taste the way that you would think it would taste, being as thick and sedimenty as you
chewy.
would.
So speaking of chewy, we've got some really good questions, and we're going to get into it. We're going to dedicate this hour to it. And by the way, Matt, did you want to mention we have Brittany? Obviously, we do have Brittany behind the scenes, and maybe we'll see her, maybe we won't. Hopefully we will. But we do have a couple incentives, right, for involvement and participation.
Absolutely. We've got a couple of super secret prize packages that are going out that are actually, we're going to put together some cool, maybe a Klipsch employee or Klipsch rep only items that we have around the office, some celebratory things. So somebody's going to get something that the general public does not get or does not have access to. Might be a wearable, might be a poster, might be a cool DVD, might be some training material. It might be actually you have to go to one of our retailers and explain how Klipsch works for us a little bit. That may be a job assignment as well. That would be fantastic. But no, we are going to give away a couple of prize packages. They'll be secret, but we'll do that post, and they'll be given to best questions in the chat.
Yep. It won't be a DVD, by the way. It'll be at least a Blu-ray. We're not going to punish you with the DVD. Has anybody pulled out
just laying around probably somewhere?
I've got DVDs, and you put them in your Blu-ray player, and you're like, this was the greatest when it came out. Now
Did you say grainiest or greatest?
Greatest. Well, right.
Grainiest.
Totally it was better than Laserdisc.
Those are fighting words there, though. I don't know.
I just dated myself with that one. I still have.
640 by 480, man. That was the pinnacle.
Woo,
so, do you guys want to get right into it?
Yes,
absolutely.
Should we ask some questions?
I'm prepared.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with a very interesting question, and this is a Klipsch-specific question, but you're all qualified to answer this. But this is the number one question that we got from Google. The most important question is, what's the best Klipsch speaker? That is such a crazy general question, and you can talk application specific, but in your opinion, what's the best Klipsch speaker?
Yes.
Who wants to answer? Who wants to answer first? I'm going to dive in because I actually chose 3 for this setup. RP600M Mark IIs with a subwoofer. So if you have a subwoofer available, If you have room for floor standers, it's the RP8000F Mark II and associated content for movies. For 2-channel setups and something great that looks beautiful in the living room, it's the Forte 4. Those are my favorites. They're not necessarily answering the question of which are the best speakers.
Did you see what Jill just typed?
Klipsch.
Klipsch.
Yeah. And Chad typed the Jubilee. I would have to say the Jubilee.
You got to dance who brung you. Yeah.
If I can only afford a living room big enough to
Right.
accommodate the Jubilee.
Right. Well, my answer when I first heard this was it depends. It depends on your home environment. For some college students in the dorm room, it's the Pro Media 2.1. You know, for people that commute in the city, it's the in-ears. So whatever gets you close to the music and makes your skin, you know, gives you goosebumps, whatever works for you. That's why we have the spectrum of products that we make, everybody. We want to win your heart wherever you are in your stage of life, or, you know, your appreciation for music, or maybe your budget.
Or space.
Yeah, of course.
Even if budget is no limit. You know, that's why I named kind of 3, because I know the 600M, you can take those and put them in the back of a car. You can leave the store with those speakers and you can set them just about anywhere and they'll live with you forever.
Yeah. Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think this space has a lot to do with it. I've got a relatively small listening room, maybe 13 by 14, something like that. And what I've found is sometimes it's possible to get too big a speaker in this room. You know, I've had Cornwall 4s in here, and while I appreciated a lot of things that were going on, they were not the best fit for the room. They probably work a little better with a little more space around them. You know, and the Forte 4s in this particular room, as an example, work great, as do the RP8000. So they're definitely, you know, there's no wrong answer to that question. And these products each voice and do things slightly differently, but I think the room size is a big one. You know, what can you live with? What's going to sound good in your environment? That's a big question.
That's a great response. I think from, you know, you got a lot of responses based off a very simple question. And I think that's the answer is sort of complicated. I'm going to say for me, you know, and I've had Fortes in my house for a couple of years now that I just have so fallen in love with. They're just dialed into my ears. But the pinnacle of, I think, Klipsch design theory is it has to be the Jubilee, especially from where it came, and a fully horn loaded 2-way system with that amazing DSP that has all of the Klipsch tenets of a Klipsch design, the hallmarks of it. It's sort of that pinnacle of Paul Klipsch's design, but everything else from there is also trickle down. So for the application, but that's just from recent listening.
So if there was one answer, what is the best Klipsch speaker? It is the Jubilee. I think we can all settle on that.
That's from an objective. Yeah. I mean, the subjective part is what works for you. And what's beautiful about it, and I know we're going to move on to the next question because this is really a philosophical question for us. The design philosophy of Klipsch is embodied in our products, and it just scales. It just scales. So the reference Premier line is a perfect example. The small ones have the same acoustic quality of the larger ones. It's just that the larger ones, they require less power and they can fill a larger room. So that sound quality just scales to how big a sound you want, or how big your room is, or both, how much power you have as well. Because the Klipsch speakers are very sensitive. You don't have to go wild with the amplifiers, but if you want to, they will reward that with greater dynamic range.
That's actually the second most
it is
question, and I think you guys will love to chime in on this. You know, what is the best receiver or amplifier for Klipsch speakers? And I know Rob's got some opinions on this one for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to hand this over to the expert. We were talking a little bit before the live show started, and Rob dropped some knowledge on us, and I want to hear it for the general audience.
Well, I dropped some knowledge that came from an engineer. I want to be clear about that. The reality is, it's one of the most misunderstood things, I think, in the business is, you know, power ratings and how much power do you need, etc. You know, the power ratings are when stuff breaks, and obviously we don't want stuff to break. So you want to stay within that guideline. But I think what a lot of people are surprised by with the AV receivers is that most of the time when they're listening to them, those AV receivers are putting out a very small amount of their capable output. So for example, on an Onkyo receiver that is in 0 to 100 display of the power of the volume rating, about 50 is a fraction of a watt. Depends on the receiver. It's a little bit different on certain models, but somewhere in the order of maybe an eighth of a watt or a quarter of a watt at 50. And then as you goose that volume up to say 60, you're probably going to be getting around 2 watts. And as you get up to 70, which is pretty darn loud in most rooms with most speakers, you may be pushing maybe 15 watts, give or take. So while the amplifier might be rated at 80 or 100 or 120 or even more, most of the time at reasonable listening levels, even reference listening levels, the amount of continuous output on the receivers, much lower than most people would expect. What is key though, is you want to have some headroom around that. Because when something happens, right? When something very dynamic happens in the movie, the bass hits, glass breaks, cars crash, whatever, that stuff tends to be a bit louder, and you want to preserve without distortion. You want to be able to preserve that signal. So that's where the headroom comes in. So you want to have a minimum of about 3 times headroom over your standard, core continuous average. And, if you can get up to 10 times, that's really fully ideal, where you should never hear distortion with your system. So if you're idling at a couple of watts, 10 times that is 20. If you're idling at 15, 10 times that is 150. So typically in most situations, most rooms, most efficiencies of speakers, 80 watts, 80 watt amplifier will do just fine. But for somebody who's looking for the premium experience, never having distortion, you want to ramp that up a bit and get into the 100, 120 kind of territory to make sure you can do that. A lot easier to do with the Klipsch speakers because of their efficiency, which you guys are much more able to talk about than I am. So I'll toss it back.
Well, some people may not realize that the difference between 25 watts and 100 watts is the same difference audibly from 100 watts to 400 watts. So when you get into the higher power ranges, you run out of power pretty quick, because everyone should know, and I think if you're into audio, you know that our hearing sensitivity, it's logarithmic. And you have to double power to increase 3 dB. 3 decibels is perceptible by the human ear. 1 decibel is probably the minimum perceived difference.
Yeah.
But 10 decibels by the ear is perceived as twice as loud. Twice as loud. So let's go with an extreme example. If you're at a concert and in your seating position, I was going to say 110 decibels. If you're at a concert and you're Rob, it's 120 decibels. Okay. Now, if a jet, 747 flies right over the concert, it's 130 decibels. That jet, that 10 decibel increase is twice as loud as the concert you're listening to. You might not even hear the concert that you're in.
Yeah.
But the power, the acoustic power of 10 decibels is significant. To your ear, it's twice as loud. To the amplifier, you need 10 times the power. If you're feeding your speakers 10 watts and you're getting a volume level, if you want 10 more decibels, how many watts do you need to feed it, Vlad?
Oh, times 10, right?
100 watts. If you're feeding your Klipsch speakers 100 watts, which they can handle, and you want 10 more decibels, how many watts do you need to feed them?
1,000.
1,000 watts. 1,000 watts. Okay. Not many people have 1,000 watts laying around.
But you're going to blow some stuff up.
Well, this is an advantage that Klipsch has, because really you only need to feed 10 watts to the Klipsch typically for a given volume that another speaker requires 100 watts. And then for that 10 decibel increase, you feed the Klipsch 100, it can do that. You feed the competitor 1,000, they melt. The amp is going to freak out. It's going to distort. So Klipsch allows dynamic playback levels that are physically impossible with a lot of other speakers that are low sensitivity, 10 decibel difference, for example. So this difference between power and decibels, it's very important. It's laws of physics. But Rob, you said something that I can't resist, because this is one of the best quotes of Paul Klipsch himself. Because we're typically listening with a few watts, right? That's what you said, right?
Yep.
He said what the world needs is a great 5-watt amplifier, because that's where we live. That's where we reside. And then if you do need the extra, you need that headroom, 15 watts, 20 watts, that's pretty easy to achieve, right?
Yeah.
But when you're feeding a lot of power into other loudspeakers, that's where that's where the dynamic compression kicks in, and it reminds you're listening to electronics, as opposed to, I think why people love Klipsch is that they can forget they're listening to a system and really get lost in the music. And a lot of reviewers have said, dynamics, some companies just kind of dismiss it. But Paul Klipsch himself said dynamics are the secret of a live performance, of reliving a live performance. Dynamics are where it's at. So
also another useful piece of information that I didn't know before I started at Klipsch: larger speakers are inherently more efficient than smaller ones. You would think, like, oh, if it's bigger, it's heavier, so it takes more to pick up. Like, it requires more power to drive. It's actually the opposite. It's the little speakers that are less sensitive and less efficient. And it's the bigger guys that can deal with 1 watt and give you tons of output. So counterintuitive in the world of physics. So now you know.
Well, and I'm seeing a couple of questions. We touched on this just briefly, and I think this is important when you talk about matching an amplifier to a speaker. There's a couple of points that are really interesting to make. One is that amplifier designed for that speaker, like a powered speaker, or is it an AVR that is designed to work with a lot of different things? But people often talk in layman's terms about things like clean power and sensitivity, and the sensitivity of the speakers and those types of things. Can you guys maybe answer some questions about those topics? Does the amplifier, the quality of the power that comes out of the amplifier matter? Is that even a topic that people think about anymore?
Yeah, I can speak at least from an integrated systems perspective, as opposed to buying an amplifier, then hooking it up to a pair of passive speakers, and then use a crossover network to kind of, like, as a sanding block, essentially. It's getting all of this power, but then it's turning some of it into heat and making it sound really clean. In an integrated system, very, very different world. You have amplifiers that are typically over-spec'd for what you need, so you can use the area of that range, that bandwidth, without any kind of distortion. And then we use limiters and compressors in order to get the most out of the speaker. So now you also even have dynamic volume. So where some speakers, they stay flat, and you can raise them only so much. Well, now with compressors and limiters, I can take on some of those things that Rob was mentioning, like explosions, car crashes, and not damage the speaker, and not have to overpower, run too much power. I can make sure the speaker doesn't get damaged because I put a compressor or a limiter along the path. So now I'm also actually able to get dynamically a little bit more output. So I'll let the high frequencies go a little bit more to get really the most excitement, without having to have an amplifier that's too much. So you can't do direct comparisons between a passive speaker and a conventional audio video receiver compared to what amplifier power you get, say, in your soundbar or a powered speaker. They're different animals, and they're used very differently. We have a lot of knobs to turn when we use amplifiers.
I want Rob to weigh in on this too, but I would say that typically self-powered speakers, really dialing it in the digital domain, dedicated amps per driver, it's really to squeeze more performance out of small form factor speakers. Our powered monitors or soundbars, they're smaller form factors, so we can benefit from digital customization, all the things that Vlad mentioned. But with larger speakers and separate amps, they don't have some of those limitations, and people really love to choose their amps for the Heritage products, for example. And Rob, I want you to speak to this, but I kind of was an audio nerd when I was a teenager, and I studied up on tube amps and solid state, were the benefits. And back then it was the specification war to get 0.000% THD or 0.000% TIM or whatever to get the specs. You know, a lot of amplifier companies would use tons of negative feedback. They would use negative feedback and feed forward. They would do all these things to get the distortion down. But what I think the result was that the amps were less musical. And what people love about tube amps is that the harmonic distortion is even order. It's even order, just like a musical instrument. Harmonics of a musical instrument are multiples, even order. And when a tube amp misbehaves, you don't really hear it. It just sounds kind of musical because it's even order distortion as opposed to odd order distortion. So second, fourth, eighth order versus first, third, fifth, even and odds. So musicality, and with that, I will tee it up to Rob, because Rob, you're an audiophile. You've been into tube amps and you love solid state, and you know the benefits of both. I will hand it off to you at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this is a deep topic.
It is.
I'll say it this way. There are really good amplifier designs, whether we're talking about solid state designs that are class A, B, class D, G, H, the new GANFET stuff. That's all capable of sounding really good. You've got to look at the overall amplifier design and listen to those products to get a feel for them. So there is no right or wrong way. There are different ways, to build an amplifier. Onkyo is an example. Most of their experience is in class A/B designs, and with the rad amplification history that they've done, they'll generally put a larger power supply to support really low bass response on the mid to upper models, and that will give you more bass slam like you might get with a class D design, but preserve the texture and the detail on the top end that a lot of class D designs might compromise on, or things like tone, right? Tone oftentimes is benefited by a tube design. It tends to be a little bit of a ring out or a little bit of a delay that can kind of suspend that music in the air, and that's a lot of times what people like with most class D designs. The way that the image is presented, it's here and gone, and it can be really precise and really exacting, but maybe not have that richness, right?
It could be a little clinical, right?
Right, and if a class A/B is designed right, you're generally able to get in the middle of that and get really good bass performance and get the texture and the detail and some sweetness on the top end. So there's no bad way to, no bad technology, in terms of amplifier design. There are differences, and depending on what the amplifier is and the approach that you take, if you design it correctly, it can be, favorable presentation to most people. So
yeah, I agree 100%. We talked about the Jubilee and how it easily accommodates the biamping approach. And if somebody wants to put tubes on the high end and then put robust power on the bottom end, solid state, you're going to get the benefits of both portions of the spectrum where maybe there's some scrutiny or the audiophile world focuses in on, where maybe tube amps, they let go on the bottom end, but then put the horsepower on the bottom end, but then the musicality and the sweet sound on the high end. And people have been asking about the Jubilees and how are they different than the Klipsch horns? And we have covered some of that in other sessions, but this is a deep conversation. Rob, you just got me going with everything you just said. That is good stuff. I love it.
You guys, I want to interject, maybe change the subject just a little bit, because we have a whole lot of mailbag to get through. This is such a great open-ended question, and we get this.
We have 2 hours. Don't we have 2 hours?
Yeah, exactly. Fred Klipsch once told me there's a lot of hours after midnight.
I'm a night owl, so I know what that. I agree.
Yeah. So this question, I think, is general enough that we can speak to it. And I'd like to hear from both sides of this, the Klipsch side and the Onkyo Pioneer side. Mm-hmm. Which of your products are for music and which of them are for cinema? A very interesting question.
I sort of had a tongue-in-cheek answer to this question when I read it earlier. And I said, if you have two, it's best for music. And if you have more than two, it's best for movies.
There you go. I like that answer. Multi-channel, right?
Yeah.
I will say this in voicing, we always voice our products with music. Music is our absolute measure of accuracy. Surround sound, it's engineered, right? A lot of the effects are engineered. Now, could be accurate digital samples of this crash sound or this punch, things like that. Foley, right? The sound effects in movies. But our measure of accuracy starts and stops with music. If it reproduces music with accuracy, it will be absolutely accurate for surround and home theater. So that's my quick answer. I'm going to let Rob talk now.
Yeah, and I think on the Onkyo side of the house, the sound tuning is done first in 2-channel as well. And music is, where Onkyo and Pioneer, for that matter, started, and it is the root. So, and there are listening modes in the AVRs that will allow you to, use just a direct, 2-channel interpretation to 2 speakers. Or if you want to add a subwoofer, you can do that and do 2.1. So there's a lot of different ways to break it down. You might even decide that on movie night, you want to engage, your full 5.1 or 7.1 or 11.1 or whatever you're working with speaker system. But when you turn on music and want to sit down with a glass of wine and listen to half an album or something, you may want to put it in direct or in 2.1 mode to have more of a natural presentation that would sound more like a live performer is in the room with you. And, we enable that through the different sound modes to add DSP or take away DSP and have you listen to the straight source. So all the products are really conceived with both in mind. Some of the products, obviously, they're only 2-channel oriented, are dedicated to that purpose. But from an AVR perspective, they're tuned with stereo first, but they're really designed for both uses.
Yeah. And I guess to the original question of your speakers for music or movies, if your speakers are good with music, they'll be good with movies. If your speakers are good with movies, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be good with music. So keep that in mind. And that's something that we definitely use. We tune everything with music. It's a great starting point because of that theory.
Well, don't you think that most people have an easier time when they're listening to music to sort of understand, like, oh, that's what that's supposed to sound like, right?
Yes.
Versus a movie, it's like, I don't really know necessarily what this movie's supposed to sound like. It's the first time I've heard it.
Yeah.
The third time, it's 2 hours of content, and I can't remember this scene exactly, right?
Right.
So I think that's why for most people, it's like you listen to music and you're like, that either sounds like a piano or it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hopeful that we know the sound of a guitar more so than a car crash. There's probably
I know what a car crash
derby guys out there that are like, I know twisted metal, but yeah.
That's another Vladism. That's the Vladism of.
Somebody write that down as a people.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Funny enough that we're working on some new products, and I really did think that I knew music the way that I knew music until I've been testing some new products that are kind of around the corner, and I was surprised by a few select tracks that made me go, whoa, I didn't know that sound was there. And we have a car that has a really good audio system in it, and I heard the same track. I was telling Matt Summers earlier today, heard that same track playing through that car, and that octave was not there. So I had to come home and enjoy it.
Don't get me started, Vlad. Don't get me started. Come on now.
The idea.
No. We're spiraling out of control. Please take control of the mailbag.
You're baiting me with that comment. I'm going to just do this right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I love the idea of and you made the comment earlier about infinite resolution, which we were having that conversation about. TV can scale to a certain degree. You're going to get 8K, then you're going to get, you're going to continue to go on. But really, we've kind of encapsulated the breadth of human hearing within audio. So all we can do right now is really present that and try to get closer and closer to the source material to get because the resolution's there. We just have to keep mining for it, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
stuff that was shot at 640 by 480 in the 80s for a sitcom, good luck. You're not going to get any more resolution out of that ever.
Oh my gosh, don't get me started. Okay, I got to make this comment. Okay. So everybody, as a kid in the 70s and 80s, really the 80s, all I wanted was the deep bass, man. As a drummer, I wanted to feel the bottom octave. And, I built a sub in high school, and, in the magazines, they're talking about, what is a subwoofer? Subwoofer. That sounds killer. Subwoofer. What the hell is a subwoofer? Oh my gosh, I got to find this. I got to dig deeper. And, anyway, so I think the most satisfying today the satisfying thing in audio today in the 21st century is getting a killer setup with good mains. Invest what you can in your main speakers, your left and rights. Dial in a sub. Do it with music. Get that balance right. Don't turn your sub up too loud. Blend it nicely. Find out in your listening position where the subwoofer should be placed. Once you have that, you're going to enjoy all your music like you've never heard it before. That is a killer benefit of modern technology. And then, of course, the home theater aspect of that. When you dial it in and you get it just right, when you throw in different movies, music is one thing, but when you throw in different movies and you get that sensation of accurate sound to go with the movie, it's going to transform your movie watching experience. When you put on things like my girls, they want to cuddle up on the couch and watch Mandalorian, Boba Fett, Obi-Wan's coming, and Obi-Wan is pretty strong. When you sit down and you black out the room and you do that with your loved ones, when your system's dialed in, there are a few things that are better than that. We recently had a session with our dealers and distributors and reps about the Jubilee. And the Jubilee does things that just defy what we've all heard before. When you feel and hear all your music without limits, I will say it, without limits. This is a speaker that just kind of says, oh, physics and limitations, please. It's like they have no limits. And we're talking with real world amplifier power, not kilowatts. We're talking real world amplifier power. So I would emphasize everybody, and we'll cover this more in further sessions, but dialing in your speakers with a sub and getting the balance right. Rob, how much time have we spent listening and making sure when we're at shows that it's right? Vlad, Matt, how many times have we sat down, whether it's a sales meeting, it could be a trade show, it could be anywhere we're setting something up. How much time do we put in to make sure it is right? And when it's right, then you just say, what do you want to hear? We'll play anything. That's so satisfying. And
most of the work is there, Mark. Honestly, you remember national sales meeting a year ago? We had 2 RP 8000F Mark IIs, and we just needed them to play for a group of people. So there wasn't even multi-channel. There wasn't subwoofers involved. There wasn't room correction or any of that happen. And it was probably a couple of hours of like, move them a little bit here, move them a little bit here, toe them in, toe them out. Is the phase correct? Let's play a couple of tracks and see what the room does. Let's put them a little closer to the wall. Let's pull them a bit back out. And that made all of the difference between a really engaging experience and one that was kind of like, yeah, there's music coming out of speakers, but it doesn't seem to really have a cohesive sound stage and image and be able to play the frequency range that we know the speaker can.
Absolutely.
I would argue the speaker placement is so important that you guys might want to consider an episode.
Well,
we
let me qualify what Mr. Vlad is saying, that we were setting up in a ballroom and we were demonstrating for 50 people at a time. So this is a little bit different than the home setup.
Your living room. Yeah.
But we wanted that intimate sound presentation that you would get in your home, but we did it on a large scale with these 8,000 F.
We had a little bit of a bigger challenge on our hands. We had to accommodate essentially 100 chairs in a room.
No pressure. No pressure. It's a new product. Make it sound great in this ballroom.
And it's a massive ballroom. But this goes to say, if you minimize that to okay, I've got a couch. I've got a left seating position, center seating position, right seating position. I've got a wall. There's a TV on it. Spend more time not tweaking with the electronics. Just leave those alone for a minute and see if you can get it to sound right just by pulling it away from the wall a little bit, towing it into your seating position, sitting in the different positions on the couch. I mean, you can spend thousands of dollars and not achieve the latitudes of improvement that you will achieve by doing those things.
Great segue. Great segue. Set them up first, and then if you want to do the room correction. Rob, did you see that last question?
Yeah, I did, and that was what I was going to say. I always want to do the manual setup first, and you know, I've got a technique that I like to use. I start with a single speaker, roll in stereo, then add the sub. But the reason you want to do that, and it's not because the room EQ is not powerful, because the room EQ can do a lot of things. It can make sure that, oh yeah, that speaker's 10 and a half feet away. It can do some phasing adjustments, etc., depending on the room EQ itself. So they can do a lot of things. But if you're asking the room EQ to make adjustments to overcome placement issues you could have got in the first place, then you're adding equalization or adding delay unnecessarily. You just as soon get the physical set as close to the pin as you can. That way, when you do the auto calibration over the top of it, it's making minute adjustments, and you're not having to change the signal as much as you play back content. So definitely get the physical right.
Yeah.
And then go in for the frosting right at the end with what you can't fix physically.
Yeah. I got amen to that. In our last session, I was talking about control directivity with Klipsch, and it puts the sound where you want it, and there's less to correct, right? Remember that phrase? Right. So get it dialed in, and don't put that burden on a microprocessor to fix stuff that you could just dial in your room. With control directivity, you're not going to aggravate room reflections as much. So if you're starting out, I think, ahead with a Klipsch setup with control directivity, and then of course with the sophisticated electronics, you can get it dialed in even more. But go ahead, man.
On the Subwoofer side, I've got one question that keeps coming up, and the first part of it's a little bit of a softball, open-ended, but the second part of it I think is really interesting. What's the best frequency to cross over my subwoofer, and do I do that on the sub or the amplifier on the receiver?
I'll let the resident expert in subwoofers answer that, Mr. Mark Cassavant.
Well, it depends on your main speakers and what their effective low frequency extension is. You know, the new RP 8000s, they dig deep, just like their predecessor. They get down well below 40 hertz. They get into the low 30s. But what the advantage of the subwoofer has is that it could be positioned in a room where it has better loading. So, or two subs can spread that bass energy out. Your main speakers, they could be a bookshelf speaker. They're positioned for sound staging, right? They might not get the best bass loading where they are. The advantage of a sub is you position it for the best bass loading and impact in the listening position. So it can vary from, you can cross it down to 40 hertz for a tower. You can cross it on up to 60 and 80 hertz for a bookshelf. And that is a beautiful new unique feature of these Onkyo AVRs. Rob, I hand it to you.
Yeah, you know, I think the second part of that question is, should you let your electronics handle it or let your subwoofer handle it?
Yes.
I'm gonna answer that question unconventionally first, which is a common mistake that we see is people do both. And you absolutely don't want to do both. And the reason you don't, so let's say that you go in and on your Onkyo AVR, you set the crossover at 50 hertz, and then you go behind your subwoofer and you set it at 50 hertz. What you're doing is you're ganging that crossover, and instead of having whatever the roll-off slope is, let's say it's 12 on each device for conversation, it becomes a 24 dB deep dive then between the two, and now the separation can create a gap in the frequency response. So using both at the same frequency is a problem. Typical best practice on AVRs is to use the AVR crossover. And so in that case, you'd go to your subwoofer, you roll it to wide open so it's not affecting the signal in any way, and then you'd let the crossover that's happening in the electronics device handle it from there.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
Big one.
If I had to start, I would say start at 80, see if you can go to 60, and then really, if you want to test some stuff, go to 40. And just like Rob said it, let the sub go to LFE. Don't set that as a crossover. A similar analogy I'd like to make is, you've got a car with brakes, and when you hit the brakes and you hit them halfway, you're slowing down at a certain speed. Now, what you're doing by taking that subwoofer and crossing it over at 80 hertz as well is you're hitting the brakes twice as hard. So you're going to create a gap is what's going to happen, and nothing is going to compensate for it because it's going to not know what the heck's going on.
That's a great answer to that, guys. So I'm going to keep moving on because we got a lot in the mailbag still, and we don't have another hour. Mark, I think you could go all night, which is good. Fantastic. A
lot of hours after midnight.
Hey, as long as there's some beer, I can go the distance. I've been, hey, if you do it at a bar, we can certainly do it live with our friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, I have to say real quick that Zachary Adams asked a really cool question that was addressed at Skywalker Ranch when I went to THX training way back in the day. And it was, what kind of everyday items do you use for sound dampening? What do you have in a room where you don't have to put all this expensive room treatment up? What can help? Well, you see over here, I have blinds and they're semi-open. That kind of reflects sound. If you have plants like silk tree, anything that can break up reflections in a room. If you have hard surfaces, if you have wood floors, definitely throw a throw rug in there, and some furniture, things to break up reflections every day. That's the beauty of it. You can use everyday items. You don't have to use special acoustic treatment. And that was kind of like, duh. When I was at THX training, they're like, listen, you can get creative, make it decorative. You don't have to go foam everywhere and make it look weird. It can just be everyday stuff. All right, sorry, go ahead.
That's a great.
Well, you can get pretty good with household items. So if you're aiming at a recording studio or really making the room not respond to the speakers, then you go with specifically bass traps and various things that you have at your disposal. But you also want to do two things. You want to absorb some of the sound, and you want to reflect it kind of everywhere.
Bass traps, that's a joke for me. There's no bass trap. Are you kidding me? There are no bass. You can't stop bass. It's like bass trap. My garage is the bass trap. That's how I look at it. It's like, give me a break. I'm sorry.
I think a basic tip is, if you can walk into a room and you can clap and do that, and you can hear a little bit of an echo, then you definitely need something to absorb some of that sound. Now, if it's one of those things where it's totally dead, you walk into a room and then you're going the other way. So.
Like the chamber.
You know what else they said at THX, and it was cool. It was in the early days of my audio career. I went there, and so they said, your front channels, you want it to be pretty dead up front, because you don't want a lot of reflection with your front channels, and that's where control directivity, those horns, toe them in, you got your left, center, right, you got your focus. But with surrounds, back then it was Dolby Pro Logic, and they had the dipole surrounds and the decorrelation.
You wanted some bounce.
And you don't, it's okay if it's live back here, because that's the surround ambient information. So you want a combination if you can do it.
It's all about control. I think it really is. It's about being able to control the environment. I'm in a different environment than you guys are, because I'm in a recording studio. I'm mixing near field with the fives.
And you got feedback. You just proved you're in a studio, because I just heard feedback. What'd you do? Hit your mic?
Exactly. But I've got a little bit of, look at this. I got a little bit of control on the ceiling.
Yeah, right.
A little bit of control, and then I've thrown some rugs down in the space, so you can kind of see what I'm doing on the hardwoods.
It's probably got medium reflectivity, because it gives it character. Your recordings have character,
and you decide how close you want to put the mic to it. You decide how much room you want when your mic in near field. All right, so moving on. We have a lot to get to.
Next. You've lost control, Matt.
I've lost control. We want to this is also a very open-ended question, but I would like for you guys to set the record straight. There's a lot of confusion in the marketplace, or just in general conversation. What's the difference between Dirac and Atmos?
I'll take
apples and
that one.
oranges.
Sure. Atmos is a rendering technology that allows a very high-end, very realistic multi-channel presentation to take place. I had the honor of being involved with the cinema rollout of Dolby Atmos more than a decade ago. And in a cinema, it can be up to 64 different speakers. And the big change was twofold. One, put speakers on the ceiling. So it's not just about steering the image around the room, but it's also this immersive level of having sound come in over your head. So things can literally move on the diagonal, if you will, anywhere in the space. But the big breakthrough with the artists that make the content for Dolby Atmos is that they get in the old days, they had a channel bed. So if they had, say, 7 different speakers, they could assign what sound was going to come out of what speaker in order to create the content. With Dolby Atmos, they get that. They get basically an 11-channel box, if you will, but they also get a 3-dimensional box to work with where they literally can drag that sound anywhere they want to in 3-dimensionality. And basically, the processing engine that encodes the format and then the processors on the other end are so sophisticated. They operate at such a fast speed that they can unpack this massive amount of information. And in your room, okay, whether you've got 64 speakers or you've got 11 or maybe 15, or maybe you only have 7 with virtual Atmos as an example, or even 2, it will create that sound in that space to the best of its ability, regardless of the channel count. Based on it knows what the sound is, where it's supposed to be in the room, and it will recreate it inside your box and inside your listening area. So that's Atmos. D-Rack is another thing. D-Rack is the room tune, the most sophisticated room tune that's available on the market to consumers. And frankly, it's used a lot in Pro as well. And that will take measurements of your room and essentially tune the room, which is the final component, right? We've got our speakers, we've got our AVRs, speaker wires, interconnects, TV, all those, Apple TV, those are all components. The final component's your room. And once you've set everything up in the room and you tune it manually, right? You place things where it's supposed to be. D-Rack can come in over the top and it can fix problems that are inherent with the blend between your system and the room and make it sound even better. Sometimes you might have some bass that's kind of lagging or resonating back and forth in the room. They can clean that up. We can measure it and clean it up and make it sound more focused. So Atmos on one hand, that's the most sophisticated surround format out there for consumer use. And on D-Rack, that's the most sophisticated room tune.
Yeah, and you'll never go back once you have it. By the way, I think it was Eric in the questions. I was kidding about the bass traps. The reason I was joking about the bass traps is because I have 4 subs in here, really 5. I've got 4 up front and 1 in the back. So the joke with my kids is that, bass traps, it's like a joke in here. It just rattles the house. There's no stopping it here. So it's a little extreme here. So I was a little bit facetious with that comment. So just so you know.
Will Atmos do virtual surround with just 2 speakers? It will. And one of the cool things about Onkyo Pioneer too, just a little sales pitch, but every receiver in the lineup actually does Atmos, which is rare. So even the most affordable pieces have the Atmos decoder built in, and they will create an immersive effect from however many speakers you hook up.
Virtual, the upmixer feature is one of my favorites.
I love
it.
Kind of set it and forget it. You just set it to upmix to the speakers that you have, and all content sounds pretty much awesome.
Everything sounds great.
Yeah,
I listened to, I think when I was an early Atmos adopter, I threw in a DVD of Joe Satriani live in San Francisco, and it was a PCM 2-channel, decent resolution audio, but it was only 2-channel with the video. But in Atmos, I couldn't believe how it kept the rhythm section, the drummer and the bass. They're locked in
It
center
knows.
stage.
It knows where to place.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And then his guitar effects were all over the front, and then the audience wrapped around. I was like, oh my gosh, what is this wizardry? It changed me forever for concert videos, old concert videos that you just can't find anymore. Atmos mixing, it is the best.
So we talked about virtualization a little bit in the virtual Atmos, and that's a very effective solution as well from a scalability standpoint. But there's a lot of questions, and people keep coming back to this. I can't do Atmos, or I'm worried about Atmos because I have vaulted ceilings, or I have some treatment, or that type of thing. But talk about that a little bit, if you could. Is that an issue? The ceiling height?
Okay. So we've done sessions with Brett Crockett, the VP of R&D with Dolby. Great guy. We've done press junkets with him. I just love spending time with him. And so the upfiring technology from our loudspeakers that use the ceiling, they took it to real world environments. It will accommodate vaulted, cathedral ceilings, flat ceilings. It's designed to work with all of them, up to and beyond 14 feet. One thing they loved about the Klipsch is with the use of control directivity in our horn-loaded upfiring design. So we're using directivity to put it on the ceiling and really create a giant sound source above you that is a fantastic alternative to discrete surrounds that are in the ceiling. So hopefully that answers your question. It doesn't have to be a flat ceiling. It works with different ceiling types in typical home environments. It was designed to be very practical. And if people don't know this, there is sound processing in the receivers that accommodate the way we hear sound behind and up. So the shape of the pinna, the outer ear, the sound frequency response that results in a flat natural response in your ear from that direction and correlates to sound around you naturally with the same spectral balance as sound in front of you, direct or right on the side. You ever notice when you turn your ear to hear it right on axis with your ear? So they have accommodated the way the human hearing mechanism works, which I love about Dolby because that's Paul Klipsch. Everything he did was about the human hearing mechanism. So that is legit. And if you have a situation that might be what you think is, oh, that might not work, try it. You'll be fine. The algorithms are solid. It's not just the processing in Rob's AVRs, but it's also the frequency response designed into our upfiring channels. And we do have that model. It's the SA, which is it doubles as a surround on the wall. And then it can work as an upfiring speaker, and there's a switch on the back. That switch is the filter that changes the contour for upfiring versus a flat normal response as a side surround. So there's a lot of science behind this, people, and it works.
That's fantastic. Great answer. I want to talk a little bit about, we've talked about Dirac, we've talked about Atmos, and you just mentioned the pairing between Klipsch and Onkyo or Pioneer, which is great because we're going to keep talking about that, and we're going to keep developing products that work better together as time goes on. I want to talk a little bit, if you could, Rob, about Klipsch optimize mode with these receivers, just to talk about how they interface with the speakers and what makes it better.
Sure. Klipsch Optimize mode is the brainchild of the engineers from both sides of the house, from Onkyo engineers and from Klipsch engineers getting together and having conversations about how to maximize the speakers and the experience when you unbox it and put them together. A lot of times it's confusing. We've answered questions today about where do you cross over the subwoofer, etc., for a given pair of speakers. Well, there is a right answer, and that right answer does change by speaker. So we're talking about listening and blending, etc. Well, the fact is, with an RP8000 Series 2 versus an RP600M Series 2, those are two different values, and the engineers know what those are. So the Onkyo engineers have been able to take the Klipsch input, build that in as a preset, and you can, during setup, select that preset for the Klipsch speaker that you have, and it will set that for you ideally, and will hold that measurement as you go through the room EQ environment with AccuEQ as well. So you're getting the right setting that the engineers agreed on to make sure that you get the right blend and the max performance of the Klipsch speaker components.
Okay, so is it time for a little toast and a break? I mean, we've been going pretty strong here for a bit, and I did a go off camera. I confess, because I had to go get a zombie dust. So
quickly,
I did. Nice. I did. The first one went down pretty quick. I was just savoring what Rob and Vlad were talking about, and when I'm not talking, well, you know what I'm doing? I'm drinking. So anyway, cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers. This
has been a lot of fun and
great questions. There's been so many questions. I was going to do, if you guys are okay with it, we have some questions that are showing up in the chat, but also some stuff that we pulled from earlier chats.
Wait, David, he asked, he didn't know that he can add height channels to his existing setup. So you can add Atmos to your existing speakers, everybody. We have these up-firing speakers that nest on top of your speakers, and they provide that height channel. You can do it front and rear. It's very easy to do. What's the model number they should look at, Vlad?
RP500SA Mark II.
That's it.
Okay, fantastic. Sorry, guys. But I was thinking about, all of us have questions that we want to answer from this list. I know, Vlad, there's several of them. Let's just do a little bit of lightning round since we're getting late in the game here. Vlad, what are some of the ones that you found to be the most provocative and worthy of answer?
Best center channel speaker, the RP504C Mark II. 4 5.25-inch drivers, arguably the most important speaker if you're going to choose to have a center speaker at all. Next one was, what's the best Klipsch subwoofer? I said SPL 120 because for most rooms it's gonna do great. It's not too big, it's not too small. See, Mark's thrown in the towel. I think it's five SPL 150s. Lightning round, let's go, Mark. Come on.
20 hertz. You want 20 hertz bass extension, and we're going to make everybody very happy in the near future. That's all we're going to say about that. Lightning round. Next.
Okay. Not going to touch on speaker wire. It was a sensitive topic, clearly, by previous discussion.
I like this one. If you had to choose, do you get better returns from a better set of speakers or a better amp? And
that's a tough
answer.
That's a really good one. I'm an amp guy, but I think the conventional wisdom is you should be spending more on your speakers than you do on your amp typically, and usually that ratio is somewhere in the 2-to-1 variety is kind of the rule of Hoyle. That said, you should also pay attention to real differences that you're getting as you step up in, say, AVRs or an amplifier, in terms of if you're getting a much better amplifier, if you're getting a much better room tune, as an example, or maybe you need multiple 8K inputs to handle your latest video sources. Like, that stuff matters too, so pay attention to it.
Yeah.
But if you are going to spend, say, a couple $1,000 on speakers, $1,000 on an amp, that is within the realm of sanity for most people.
Yeah, and I think everybody upgrades at a different cadence. So, and there's a law of diminishing returns in both sides. So if there are convenience features that you're lacking in your receiver, like most of us, will buy a receiver and then 5 years, we don't think about getting another one. But since then, Dolby Atmos, HDMI, eARC, 8 gigabit or 48 gigabit per second HDMI ports that are future-proof, Wi-Fi, Spotify Connect, you name it. If you don't have any of those features and you need them, the receiver is going to be your best bet. Now,
I've had to change my AVR more than my home computers. That is messed up.
Yes.
The other one that I found awfully provocative was the one that was, why put effort into traditional speakers when the trend is soundbars, built-ins, and wireless bookshelf systems? That's, I think that's probably on a lot of people's minds because, unfortunately, the world is dominated mostly by TVs without any extra sound on them. And that's not a great experience, right? So a soundbar is a major leap up from there, but going from a soundbar to separates, that's another experience already.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if you have the ability to dedicate a room to a home theater, it could be a family room, but you could still dedicate it and maybe get your separate components. But then maybe you have other rooms, auxiliary rooms where you have a TV. I mean, a lot of households have more than one TV. That's where you put a sound bar or maybe compact speakers. But if you can dedicate a room to serious high performance, you won't regret it. It's a great investment.
Yeah, and it's difficult in the world of selling speakers, and this is to answer the question of, hey, spend more time on sound bars, built-ins, wireless bookshelf speakers. If everything was like color, imagine color is also a wavelength, right? Just like frequencies that we hear, they're a wavelength. So imagine looking at a television and having red, green, blue, yellow, but no black and no white. You'd immediately notice and you'd say, like, what's going on? Like, this doesn't reflect the real colors of the world that I would expect to see. Well, with audio, you get that. With the speaker that's built into the television, it's not reproducing low frequencies. It's not doing a great job reproducing high frequency. It has very little stereo soundstage or image. But you don't know until you have a speaker system that's better. Unlike a television, if it was missing 2 or 3 colors, you'd notice something wrong right away. With sound, you probably don't. Most of the time, you're watching TV shows, dialogue sounds fine. Car Crash sounded kind of like the dialogue did, but you didn't really have an immersive effect to it. And until you have, the right subwoofers that play down to 20 hertz and the right speakers that can properly project 20 kilohertz to your ears, you're just not going to know.
I love the question, what's your favorite Atmos film to convey the quality of a home theater experience? You guys know my answer. So why don't you guys go ahead and answer that?
Pick anything from Disney Plus that has Dolby Atmos in it. It's pretty damn good, I will say. The Star Wars flicks, incredible. It's easily, you have to have new content. I mean, watching the same movie a bunch of times, sure, it's cool when your friends come over and you want to show off the system.
Unless, but we won't digress.
Yes.
I got to tell you, the thing that blew my mind, to your point, Vlad, is that all the way back to the very first Frozen that I saw in Atmos, when I saw that and all the ice was cracking in the forest all around you, that gave me chills. So that was like my very first. My favorite right now is actually not a movie; it's a series. I love watching Drive to Survive on Netflix. That is fantastic. What it does when you are in the crowd watching the race and the vibe,
sound of the cars. It's fantastic. What about you, Rob? You've got a pretty serious home theater setup.
I do. I'll tell you the most effective demos, I think, when people come over are to pull out a Dolby or DTS demo disc, because you can quickly navigate through 2 to 4 different
really cool
examples that have really good steering in them, and those are available out there on the interweb somewhere. So I'd encourage people to check that out if you don't have one in your house. But I like Baby Driver a lot. I still like A Star Is Born, because I think there's something to be said about music in a movie and getting that immersive crowd noise and stuff. So I like to use that one, but Drive to Survive I've been using lately too. I think that's an excellent recommendation.
I recommend any of you guys that have a streamer of any sort, whether it's an Apple TV or an Xbox or whatever, go into its equivalent app store and look up Dolby. You'll probably find something. Like, I know on Xbox and PC, you have the Dolby Access app, which allows you to enable Dolby Atmos and decoding, but it's got a bunch of demos along the bottom of it. I think on Apple TV, it was like Dolby Summit, which they may have used like once or twice in the last 10 years, but they have 3 cuts at the bottom there, and you play them, and it shows Dolby Vision, shows Dolby Atmos. It does a full little sweep that goes around your head and has up-firing channels, and then it does rain and thunder. It's really, really, really cool.
Now that you mentioned that, Vlad, Xbox has that too. So if somebody,
that's what I meant. Xbox, the only one that doesn't is PS5. I have a PS5 now, and Dolby Atmos is a miss. Luckily, you can upmix anything, but it's not there.
I have to weigh in. I'm a snob. Okay, here it comes. I have 4K players. Okay, Ultra Disc. Okay, this is where you get the serious uncompressed Atmos. Okay, so I got one. I got a Panasonic. I think it's an 820. Fantastic, reasonably priced. I have the Sony as well. I think it's the 800, whatever. But I just started grabbing up the 4K Atmos UHDs, okay? And you're going to laugh at me because some of the ones that I've been watching lately, I'm just for fun, you know? Battleship, I think it is, the one with Rihanna.
Oh,
and
sure.
Yeah.
You know, it's hilarious. It's great. It's fun. It's kind of campy, but it's
some great
fun.
sub stuff in there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then the one that I just love the soundtrack of is the Fast and Furious. Is it Hobbs and Shaw? Is that it? With the Rock and with Jason Statham?
Yes.
It's
where it's
hilarious.
movie now.
And it kicks some butt. It's fantastic.
That's two Rock references this episode.
Wow.
Oh, really?
A lot. You gotta get him on next.
And then, of course, any John Wick. John Wick was my early legit Atmos demo. It got me in trouble in the company because of the violence, but it was like the first disc that really showed what Atmos could do. The club scene, just all that stuff. And then, of course, the subsequent movies. They're great. They're fantastic. And they're surprisingly, they're therapeutic after a hard week at work, you know. But so have fun with it. Dune is another one. Oh my gosh, the low frequency energy in Dune is crazy.
Dune's incredible, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys. I mean, Dune, maybe people watch it. It's really part one, okay? But I learned more about the original movie with Sting.
Sure.
In the second movie, I got the information. The first movie was just crazy. It was
weird.
crazy. But the second movie, I actually, that's what okay. So I can't wait for the second one. It'll be great. So have fun exploring 4K disc, UHD in Atmos. Okay, streaming, that's nice, that's cute. You know, Disney Plus. I'm ripping on you, Vlad. But when you have the UHD, that's the uncompressed Atmos. It's full tilt, high res audio and video. See, this is what I would expect from Rob. The fact that I have to go down this road, I would expect Rob to do this. Okay, this is kind of funny to me. Anyway.
Well, I got a quick question for you guys. And we probably better look towards wrapping it up. Again, we want to let you guys know we're going to give away a couple of prize packages in the chat to the best questions. And we got to rock and roll. I'd like to ask one final question that I think is more of a culture question than less of a product question. But other than getting to listen to great audio all day long, what do you like about working where you do?
Ooh. It's the people and the arguments for me. Mark, Rob, Matt, I get to share a lot of airtime with you guys, and we get to muse on things that we're passionate about, and a lot of that is audio, and it's really, really fun. So when can you just have a job where it just feels kind of like fun, 80 to 90% of the time? And I was born to do this. I love music and movies. And are you kidding me? I can make music and movies my job. Sign me up.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
for me,
I'm
sorry. For me, it's a very simple answer. It's that everyone that I come in contact with every day is primarily focused on creating a better experience for all of the people who buy our products. There aren't anybody who's just punching the clock and checking the box and walking out. We care about it. People who care about making great products and advancing the art of this from an artistic standpoint. How can we get better involved in our movies and music? And what a better statement there could be for a brand than to say, we want your life to be better, and we all care about it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So
Rob?
for me, it's definitely about the people to a large degree. I think in the industry, because I've been fortunate enough to be in consumer electronics now for 3 decades. Imagine that. It's the pace of the change and the technology is also very stimulating. Having a very, very task load where you can come in on one day and then you learn about something new and you're off to the races on that, and then you're back to the current. I think the third thing I really like about Premium Audio Company is they're really focused on the meat of the market. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of esoteric stuff out there, maybe a little bit pretentious in cases, right?
Pun intended.
Yeah, and that's not us. You know, we're developing solutions that can work for a ton of people, keeping in mind, you know, what they cost and what it takes to implement them, right? Real world kind of stuff. And I can really appreciate that about Premium Audio Company and enjoy, you know, working in that kind of an environment because it makes a difference for a lot of people.
Yeah, like when your friends ask like what they should get, you have a good answer in the portfolio of products that we have, instead of stuff that maybe they probably wouldn't care about unless they were in the industry or super audiophiles.
Well, Mark, we'll let you have the last word on this. I know Miss Brittany Kelly has to go, so we need to
thank you,
shut it
Brittany,
down.
for everything. Brittany,
Yes.
Their kids have a game, I think. So it's simple for me. We are perpetuating the good work of Paul Klipsch. And in Premium Audio Company, we brought into the fold premium brands that uphold that reputation of audio excellence. And it seems today, maybe people aren't focused on audio equipment like they used to be, maybe in the golden age of hi-fi, you know, 80s, 90s, whatever. But people are listening to more music. And I contend that audio quality playback of your music and entertainment is one of the most rewarding ways to spend your money. And the work we're doing today is keeping the dream alive of Paul Klipsch, bringing that quality experience into the home. The fact that we launched the Jubilee, how many years later, is a testament, I think, to our commitment to do just that for the legacy of Paul Klipsch. But I will also add that for us in this business, what else could we do, really? And we all do challenge each other. We laugh. We get into it a little bit. But if the end result is a better product for all of our customers and fans, and I will add family, because when you can recommend a product to your family and not be like, I'm going to hear about this later. No. Yeah. Our products, I don't hesitate. The whole family needs to have this and that and the other. And we treat our customers and fans as family. That's one thing that's been really cool. It's been almost 32 years for me. Who works at a company for 3 decades these days? It's very unusual, I think.
Yeah.
But the job has been interesting over the years, Matt. You know this. Rob, you know this. Vlad, you're a younger guy, but I think you've got it bad. You know, this is, I think, a calling a little bit. You have to be obsessed with this a little bit to do it. I mean, you do. You have to be obsessed with it. You do.
That's fantastic.
And we are. So we're right where we should be in the world.
Well, cheers, guys. It's been a great session. We will continue to do these mailbags as the questions build up. I think it's a good way to get your questions answered. If you didn't get your question answered, we will try to do that. But we thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, everybody. Thank you for your time. And there are more questions than answers.
And the next listening lounge is going to be October 13th. Same time, but it's going to be Thrillers, Chillers, and Killers, the best systems for scary movies.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Bring it on.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks so much, Rob. Thanks for joining us, Rob.
You bet. See you guys.
Okay.